Welcome. Divine mandate. Not everyone loves you. They fall in love with the parts of themselves that you bring back to life by accident. That's the scary truth about why some people, especially those who love control, fear, and mind games, go completely crazy when a chosen one enters their space. You don't play with their ego. You don't give in to their power. You don't worship their picture. But somehow, you take up more space in their minds than the people who worship them. And here's the crazy part. Psychology says that the human brain gets obsessed with things it can't predict, change, or control. These people aren't used to being confused. But you make their certainty into noise. You break their formulas. You make their guides for manipulating people sound like comedy sketches. You're the bug they can't fix, the variable they didn't plan for, and the spiritual Wi-Fi signal they can't get through. When you think about it, it's kind of funny. These so-called masters of influence, these wannabe spiritual CEOs, are now pacing the floor, rewriting their plans, and watching your every move like they're getting ready for a Harvard exam they didn't study for. You don't even have to try to shake up their world. Just being there makes their brains go crazy. And let's be honest, they're not just curious, they are very upset, but they don't say anything. Something changes in the room when a chosen one shows up. Not loudly or dramatically, but for sure. Their confidence doesn't seem like confidence anymore. Their voice doesn't sound as heavy. Their power doesn't seem as real. You don't stand up to them. You put them at risk just by breathing the same air. This is why this subject is both serious and hard to believe. You didn't mean to make them obsessed with you. You didn't agree to be their emotional earthquake. You didn't wake up and say, "Today I'm going to shake up a whole hierarchy." But here you are, a chosen one, minding your own business, and somehow becoming the emotional hurricane in a cult leader's weather forecast. So let's look at how you became the soul they can't resist, the spirit they can't understand, and the presence they can't handle without even trying, without even knowing it. Number 1. Your honesty breaks down their illusions faster than it can build them back up. Cult leaders use smoke and mirrors, carefully crafted stories, exaggerated spiritual claims, and emotional strings to keep people dependent. Their whole identity is based on keeping other people confused enough to follow them and scared enough to never question them. But when a chosen one enters their space, everything in their system goes wrong. You don't even have to say anything. Your energy is clean, grounded, and completely real. It cuts through their shell like a knife through warm butter. They know how to read people, but they can't read you. They know how to control people, but you can easily get away from their mental grip. You can't be fooled by their tricks. As soon as they realize it, their illusion begins to break. They're used to people who hang on their every word. But you're the only one who listens without taking it in, watches without worshiping, and nods without giving in. That alone makes them less sure of themselves than any fight ever could. Being real is their kryptonite because it shows how fake they are. They act like they're enlightened, wise, or chosen by God to keep their power, but your presence shows that they're just acting. They can tell that you don't care about them, are not scared of them, and don't want anything from them. That makes them feel naked in a way they've never experienced. They can't hide behind their voice, their charisma, or their spiritual costume around you. All the layers fall off, and they can't control the pace of the unraveling. This is why they become mentally unstable around you. Their confidence wasn't real. It was borrowed from the belief systems they forced onto others. But when a chosen one arrives with natural strength, natural clarity, and natural alignment, you become the mirror they never wanted to face. You expose how much work it takes for them to pretend, while you effortlessly stand in a truth they couldn't manufacture. Even with all their manipulation combined, you don't attack their power. You expose the fact that they never truly had any. And that realization, to someone who survives on control and illusion, is enough to make them obsessed, intimidated, and deeply disturbed all at once. Number 2. You trigger their abandoned humanity, a part of themselves they swore never to feel again. Cult leaders don't rise to power by being emotionally whole. They rise because at some point in their lives, they decided that feeling was too dangerous, too vulnerable, too exposing. They built a shell around their heart and convinced themselves that emotions make you weak. So they traded compassion for control, empathy for power, and connection for dominance. Over time, that choice hardened into a personality. They became someone who could manipulate others without guilt because they disconnected from the parts of themselves that could feel guilt in the first place. Then you walk in, and without effort, you touch the very humanity they buried years ago. You don't do it by lecturing, performing, or proving anything. You do it by being real. Your kindness hits them in places they forgot existed. Your presence softens the emotional scar tissue they've layered over their heart. They start feeling again respect, admiration, attraction, fear, and all mixed together. It confuses them, it frustrates them, and it awakens them in a way they can't control. You bring out emotions they don't have the tools to handle. They don't know how to process genuine warmth, so they call it obsession. They don't know how to handle being understood, so they call it connection. They don't know how to deal with seeing themselves through your presence, so they call it love. But it isn't love. It's disorientation. It's the shock of being reminded they're human after spending years trying not to be. When they see you, something in them whispers about who they could have been if they didn't choose the path of control. And that realization is painful. You remind them of a version of themselves they abandoned, one that was softer, kinder, more open, and less calculated. You become a mirror of their forsaken potential, and that's why they fixate on you. Not because you give them something, but because your presence reveals everything they lost in the process of becoming who they are now. And for someone who built a whole identity around power, nothing is more destabilizing than having a chosen one accidentally resurrect the humanity they worked so hard to kill. Number 3. You carry a frequency their false power cannot penetrate or decode. Cult leaders thrive on predictability. They understand how most people think, react, and respond. They rely on patterns, fear patterns, approval patterns, insecurity patterns. Their entire control system works because they know what buttons to press. But when a chosen one shows up, the blueprint stops working. You don't respond to fear. You don't chase approval. You don't need validation. And you don't shrink when someone tries to dominate you. To them, that's not just confusing. It's threatening. Your energy doesn't bend to them the way everyone else's does. You don't fall into silence when they speak with authority. You don't idolize them when they exaggerate their spiritual experiences. You don't absorb their emotional pressure. And because they can't influence you, they feel like they're standing in front of something they can penetrate. That's why they obsess. They're trying to understand what they're dealing with. And the harder they try, the more they realize they don't have access to you. Their false power operates like a net. It catches the insecure, the exhausted, the vulnerable. But your frequency isn't built on fear or neediness. It's grounded in truth, intuition, maturity, and spiritual awareness. You're not impressed by theatrics, and you're not intimidated by intensity. That alone exposes the limits of their influence. For the first time, they meet someone who cannot be shaken, controlled, or emotionally rewired. Someone who stands on their own inner authority. Their mind begins spiraling because your presence contradicts everything they believe about themselves. They thought they had mastery over people, but you show them they only have mastery over the unhealed. They thought their energy was powerful, but yours sits in a completely different league. Only they can't study, copy, or manipulate. Your frequency exposes how artificial their power is. It highlights the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. And deep down, it terrifies them, not because you're aggressive, but because you're untouchable in a way they cannot ever become. You don't resist them. Your vibration simply rises above their influence. And when someone who lives off controlling others encounters a soul they can't decode, they don't just get interested, they become mentally and emotionally obsessed. Number 4. You make them realize their followers fear them, but you understand them. Cult leaders are used to being obeyed, not understood. Their entire identity is built on being the untouchable figure everyone looks up to but never looks into. Their followers treat them like something above human, part authority, part mystery, part savior. But it's all rooted in fear. People follow because they're intimidated, not because they truly see the person hiding behind the performance. Cult leaders know this. Even if they never admit it, they're surrounded by people who walk on eggshells, not people who actually connect with them. Then you appear, and everything shifts. You don't respond to them with fear, and you don't treat them like a deity. You read their energy, their insecurity, their emotional patterns, and their motives with ease. And the frightening part for them is that your understanding isn't hostile. It's accurate. You see both their power and their brokenness. You see the actor and the wounded child behind the role. You understand their hunger for control, the emptiness they try to hide, and the exhaustion that comes with maintaining a persona that's bigger than they are. To someone who has spent their whole life hiding behind dominance, being understood is more terrifying than being exposed. Followers fear them. But fear is simple. Understanding cuts deeper. When someone truly understands you, they can reach the parts you keep locked away. And when that someone is a chosen one, clear-minded, spiritually intuitive, and emotionally grounded, that understanding hits like a truth they can't escape. This is why they obsess over you. You don't worship them, but you also don't hate them. You meet them at a level where they've never been met, and it shakes them. They aren't used to connection without control. They aren't used to someone seeing their flaws without judging them. They aren't used to someone recognizing their insecurities without using them. You treat them like a human being, not a god, and that disarms them completely. For a moment, they feel something they never allow themselves to feel: relief. And that relief becomes dangerous because once they feel understood by you, every follower around them suddenly feels hollow. You become the only person who sees them clearly. And that emotional exposure creates an attachment they can't ignore, explain, or control. Number 5. Your soul doesn't respond to their hierarchy. You walk in like you don't need permission to exist. Cult leaders thrive on hierarchy. They build elaborate systems where every action, word, and thought is filtered through their approval. Their power depends on making others feel small, dependent, or obligated to follow their rules. They believe that respect is earned through fear, obedience, or carefully curated appearances. And for years, it works. People bend to their will because they've been trained to see the ladder and the gatekeepers, to measure their worth by someone else's standards. Then a chosen one enters the scene, and the whole structure falters. You don't act like you're climbing their ladder. You don't hesitate at the gate. You don't wait for their permission to exist, speak, or move. You simply occupy your space with a quiet authority that doesn't need validation. To them, this is incomprehensible. They are used to controlling the room, the conversation, and the energy of everyone in it. But here you are, completely untethered to their expectations, and their rules don't touch you. Your presence exposes the fragility of their system. Suddenly, the hierarchy they built so carefully looks flimsy, arbitrary, and performative. Every follower who once bowed their head now looks at you with curiosity and awe, because you didn't ask for approval or curry favor. And in that moment, the cult leader feels exposed, not because you're challenging them aggressively, but because you're refusing to be contained. They become obsessed, because their identity as a leader is threatened at its core. They realize that their influence depends on compliance, but you don't comply. You demonstrate that authority is not real power. Alignment and integrity are. Your independence shines a light on their dependence, and that contrast rattles them. What they cannot accept is that you don't need them. Their entire existence as a figure of control becomes unstable, because one simple truth stands out: you aren't negotiating with their system. And that truth, your unshakable presence, makes them question everything they thought they commanded. You didn't come to dismantle them. You didn't try to break them. You simply walked in as yourself, and in doing so, you became the chaos they never anticipated. Number 6. They sense a spiritual rank higher than anything they've ever pretended to be. Cult leaders often wrap themselves in titles, rituals, and grandiose claims of enlightenment, but it's all a performance. They have studied authority, practiced charisma, and polished their image so meticulously that many believe in it, even some of themselves. Yet deep down, they know it's a facade. They know their influence depends on the illusion of spiritual supremacy, rather than actual spiritual alignment. Their power feels fragile because it is. Every follower's unquestioning loyalty props them up, but it's never real recognition. It's imitation. Then a chosen one steps in, and everything they've built for appearances begins to crumble. You don't claim titles, flaunt rituals, or perform spiritual feats. You simply carry a presence that radiates awareness, wisdom, and authenticity. It's quiet, but it's undeniable. You hold a spiritual frequency that resonates naturally with people around you, and it doesn't require validation. To a leader who has spent their life pretending, Sensing someone with genuine alignment is shocking and disorienting. They instinctively recognize that you operate on a level they have only ever imitated. This recognition triggers a mix of awe, fear, and obsession. They aren't impressed in the normal sense. They are confronted by the truth that someone exists whose spiritual reality doesn't bend to manipulation or pretense. It forces them to see the limits of their influence, the superficiality of their claimed authority, and the vulnerability behind their mask. They feel drawn to you, not because of desire, but because they are irresistibly confronted with the existence of something they cannot fabricate, authentic power. Being around you is like being in the presence of a mirror that reflects everything they're not. They feel the pull of your spiritual gravity, and it unnerves them because it exposes the discrepancy between their constructed persona and actual alignment. Every gesture, every word, every subtle energy you emit reminds them of the gap between what they pretend to be and what they could never truly become. And that's why they fixate on you. Not because you seek to dominate, but because you exist as proof that real spiritual authority cannot be faked. Your authenticity doesn't just attract attention, it unsettles, disarms, and captivates in a way no imitation ever could. Number 7. You don't need their validation. And that's the one currency they can manipulate. Cult leaders thrive on control, and control comes from influence over others' emotions. They measure their power by how much people depend on their approval, seek their validation, or bend to their whims. Every compliment, every nod of agreement, every hesitant gesture of fear or admiration is a coin they collect. The more people need them, the more powerful they feel. That's why they invest so much time in reading, predicting, and shaping the behavior of everyone around them. Then a chosen one enters, and the economy of their control collapses. You don't seek their approval. You don't crave recognition. You don't care about their opinion or judgment. That single fact is a revelation to them. They are used to people whose happiness, self-worth, and sense of identity depend on their reaction. You are the anomaly. Someone whose inner compass is independent, whose energy is self-sufficient, whose presence requires nothing from them. And because of that, their entire playbook fails. Your independence exposes the fragility of their power. A thought influence meant submission, but you demonstrate that true power doesn't depend on fear, flattery, or manipulation. You hold yourself fully, unapologetically, and in doing so, you highlight the emptiness behind the authority they've built. Every attempt they make to impress, intimidate, or charm you falls flat because you simply don't operate in the same system. Your worth isn't tied to their recognition, and that fact alone terrifies them. They become obsessed because they encounter a reality they cannot control, manipulate, or earn. You show them that influence is not possession, and admiration is not dominance. Your freedom, emotional, spiritual, and psychological, is the exact mirror of what they lack and spend their life faking. That mirror shakes them, but they cannot look away. You don't need their validation, and that's the truth that unravels them. It's not loud, it's not confrontational, it's quiet, relentless, and inescapable. And for someone who survives on being the center of attention and the measure of worth, seeing someone exist outside their control is both intoxicating and maddening, making them obsess over you in ways they cannot understand or admit. Number 8. Your emotional intelligence outsmarts their manipulation before they even attempt it. Cult leaders rely on emotional manipulation more than anything else. They study people's insecurities, vulnerabilities, and desires so they can twist them for control. They're experts at sensing who needs approval, who fears rejection, who feels lost, and who craves belonging. These emotional signals tell them exactly where to push, where to pull, and where to apply pressure. And because most people operate with unhealed emotions, their tactics work almost flawlessly. But when a chosen one arrives, the emotional landscape changes instantly. You're not operating from wounds. They can't trigger what you've already healed. You're not desperate for connection. They can't bribe you with belonging. You're not confused about your identity. They can't manipulate what you've already claimed. Your emotional intelligence is so developed that you notice their tactics before they even execute them. You can sense the intention behind the tone, the motive behind the compliment, the strategy behind the friendliness. This disarms them completely. Their biggest strength becomes useless in your presence. They can't guilt trip you because you aren't fueled by guilt. They can't love bomb you because your self-worth isn't starving. They can't intimidate you because you faced far more than their theatrics. Their manipulation tools were built for the emotionally unaware, but you are aware on a level they can't navigate. This is where the obsession begins. They can't figure out how you see through them so effortlessly. They can't understand how you stay calm when they raise the pressure. They can't process how you keep your emotional boundaries intact while everyone else melts under their influence. To them, you feel like a strategist with a map to their entire personality, while they're left guessing. And the more they try to gain an emotional advantage, the more exposed they become. You don't call them out or make a scene. You simply don't fall for anything. That is what destabilizes them. They are used to manipulating people into confusion. But around you, they're the ones who feel confused. Your emotional intelligence isn't just a shield. It's a silent revelation. It shows them their tactics have limits, their mind games have cracks, and their influence has an expiration date. And that truth alone is enough to make them fixate on you endlessly, trying to understand the one person they can't emotionally control. Number 9. You carry a calm that makes their entire operation feel noisy, forced, and artificial. Cult leaders operate in chaos, and they know it. Their world is a carefully constructed storm of drama, rules, rituals, and manipulation. Every interaction, every speech, every gesture is designed to maintain tension, uncertainty, and dependency. They believe energy is controlled by volume, intensity, and spectacle, and they use that to keep everyone around them on edge. That constant high-octane atmosphere is their signature. It's how they appear powerful, unshakable, and indispensable. Then a chosen one enters, and the storm suddenly feels irrelevant. You don't raise your voice. You don't perform. You don't seek attention or validation. Your presence is steady, grounded, and unshakable. You carry a calm so natural that it highlights the artificiality of everything around you. Their rituals feel hollow. Their speeches sound rehearsed. Their charisma becomes transparent. In a room full of forced energy, your groundedness isn't just noticeable. It's disruptive. This calm exposes the gaps in their system. Their power depends on the perception of control, but your presence shows how much of that control is built on illusion. People start to notice the difference. Followers who once clung to every word, gesture, or dramatic display see that someone can exist unaffected, unmoved, and entirely self-contained, and that realization terrifies the cult leader. They become obsessed because your calm challenges the very foundation of their influence. They are used to commanding attention through noise, pressure, and fear, but you command nothing. You simply exist, and your existence exposes the artificiality of the tension they manufacture. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to compete. Your energy alone unmasks the fragility behind the persona they work so hard to maintain. They feel it in every interaction. The contrast between your ease and their forced intensity. It unsettles them because it highlights a truth they cannot fix. No amount of manipulation or performance can replicate the presence you naturally hold. And in their obsession, they keep circling back to you, trying to understand the effortless calm that makes their entire world feel loud, chaotic, and fake. Number 10. They study you instead of their followers because you're the only one they can predict. Cult leaders are used to control through predictability. They read their followers like open books, memorizing patterns, anticipating reactions, and exploiting weaknesses. Their entire sense of power comes from being able to forecast behavior, manipulate emotions, and bend people to their will. Every word, every gesture, every interaction is a calculated move. And for years, it works flawlessly. They are confident because they can anticipate almost everyone's next step. Then a chosen one shows up, and their rules change. You don't behave the way they expect. You don't follow patterns. You don't react predictably. You think for yourself, move intuitively, and respond based on your internal compass rather than external pressures. Suddenly, the strategies that once gave them control no longer work. They realize often in real time that you cannot be mapped, manipulated, or categorized. You exist outside the predictable patterns they rely on. This unpredictability is both fascinating and terrifying to them. They become obsessed, not because they are in love in the conventional sense, but because their entire expertise, years of study in people, building influence, and create systems of control is rendered useless by your presence. They watch, analyze, and overthink every word you say, every glance you give, every subtle action you take, desperate to find some pattern, some weakness, some predictable element they can exploit. But there isn't one. You are fluid, alive, and untouchable in ways they cannot grasp. Their obsession grows because unpredictability is a puzzle they cannot solve, a code they cannot break, while their followers move like chess pieces, responding to their manipulations. You are a player who doesn't obey the rules. This shifts the entire dynamic. You're no longer just another person in the room. You become the central axis of their attention, because understanding you becomes an urgent, almost compulsive task. And the more they try to study you, the less control they have. Your unpredictability forces them to confront the limitations of their own mind, the fragility of their authority, and the illusion of their power. You don't give them answers. They are left chasing, analyzing, and obsessing while you continue moving through the world entirely on your own terms. Number 11. You embody the one thing they can manufacture: genuine influence without force. Cult leaders are masters at creating the illusion of influence. They rely on fear, manipulation, emotional dependency, and carefully orchestrated displays of authority to keep people in line. Their power exists only because they can engineer reactions in others, making people act, think, or feel exactly as they want. Influence for them is a transaction, compliance in exchange for attention, gains, or approval. Without it, their authority collapses. Then you arrive, and everything they know about influence is exposed as artificial. You don't coerce, threaten, or manipulate. You don't perform, intimidate, or over-explain. Yet people respond to you, gravitate toward you, and follow your lead naturally. Your presence alone carries weight because it is authentic. You don't demand attention. It happens. You don't need to convince anyone. They already sense your alignment. This kind of influence is terrifying to a leader who has spent years manufacturing power, because it operates on an entirely different level. It's invisible yet undeniable, effortless yet undeniable. They fix it on you because they can't understand it. They can't engineer it. They can't replicate it. They see people drawn to you in ways that aren't dictated by fear, obligation, or charm, and it shakes their understanding of control. For the first time, they encounter someone whose authority isn't performative, someone whose presence creates ripples without effort. It exposes the emptiness behind their constructed dominance and reminds them that influence can exist outside of manipulation. Your authenticity highlights the gap between their illusion and reality. Every follower who reacts to you without coercion is a mirror showing them how hollow their power really is. They become obsessed because you embody what they can't achieve: authority without aggression, respect without control, loyalty without manipulation. Your influence isn't a weapon. They can't wield it. It's a state of being, and it threatens the very foundation of everything they've built. You don't teach it, argue it, or flaunt it. You simply are it, and that is what makes you unforgettable, magnetic, and impossible for them to ignore. Number 12. They feel exposed because you're the only one who sees the child behind the costume. Cult leaders spend years building a persona so tightly controlled that it becomes nearly untouchable. Every word they speak, every gesture they make, every display of confidence or authority is carefully curated. They wear their power like armor, hiding the vulnerabilities, fears, and wounds that lurk beneath to the world. They are untouchable, commanding, and precise, but underneath that performance is a child who learned early on that survival depended on perfection, control, and emotional armor. That child rarely sees sunlight, rarely feels safe, and certainly doesn't get seen by anyone in the way a human truly needs. Then you arrive, and something shifts. You don't respond to their armor or their performance. You don't interact with the facade. You interact with the essence underneath. You sense the pain, the fear, and the longing for acceptance that they have buried so deep they may have forgotten it exists. And because you see it, the leader's entire sense of self is shaken. They are exposed in a way that no one else in their world can touch. Followers see only the mask, but you see the vulnerability behind it, and that recognition hits them in a way words cannot convey. They become obsessed because they can't understand why. This doesn't leave them feeling weak or indebted. Instead, Your recognition awakens a part of them they swore would never exist. The part that feels and remembers the child that survived the world by hiding. And unlike anyone else, you don't exploit it, manipulate it, or demand it conform to your needs. You simply see it, acknowledge it, and exist in alignment with it without judgment. For a leader who has built their life on perfection, control, and the illusion of invulnerability, this is destabilizing. They can't turn off the awareness that someone else sees the truth beneath the performance. They can unsee the reflection of the child they left behind. You become a mirror of what they've sacrificed in order to survive. And that mirror is magnetic, disarming, and endlessly fascinating. Their fixation grows because no one else can reveal them in this way. And being revealed without fear or manipulation is both intoxicating and terrifying. Number 13. Your presence threatens their entire identity, not just their position. Cult leaders spend years constructing an identity that feels unshakable. They are careful architects of their persona. Every gesture, every word, every carefully curated image is designed to reinforce the story they tell themselves and the world. Their position as leader is inseparable from their sense of self. Losing followers or influence isn't just a professional problem. It's a threat to the very foundation of who they believe they are. They have built a life around being untouchable, admired, and in control. And every interaction, every observation, every follower is a thread in that tightly woven identity. Then a chosen one enters, and suddenly all of that begins to tremble. You don't challenge them aggressively, and you don't announce your independence. You simply exist. You walk into their space with a presence that radiates certainty, integrity, and authenticity. You don't seek validation, fear their judgment, or follow their rules, and in doing so, you expose the cracks in their constructed self-image. Their position, which they've always believed is their proof of superiority, starts to feel fragile because you operate outside of it entirely. Your presence makes them confront the uncomfortable truth. Their identity is performative. The power, the admiration, the control they are all built on projection, not substance. When they see you navigating the world with autonomy and alignment they can't manufacture, it forces them to feel a deep, knowing unease. They can't manipulate you, they can't predict you, and they can't rewrite your perception of them. Their carefully built persona begins to feel like a costume they can no longer wear with confidence. That's why they fix it. It's not just about control or influence. It's about survival on a psychological and spiritual level. You represent a reality they cannot mimic, fake, or dominate, and that reality threatens the very core of who they've claimed to be. Every interaction with you becomes a mirror showing them what they aren't, what they can't be, and what they desperately wish they could reclaim. You are a living, undeniable contrast to their illusion, and the truth ignites an obsession they cannot escape no matter how hard they try. Number 14. You represent the one thing they cannot control, possess, or silence, and that drives them insane. Cult leaders live by one rule: control is everything. They measure their power by how many people obey, how many minds bend to their will, and how many souls they can cage within their influence. They spend years perfecting manipulation, pressure, fear, and emotional coercion, believing that the world can be shaped to fit their desires. Authority is their lifeblood, and domination is the only proof of their existence. But then you arrive, and suddenly their core, principle control crumbles. You don't respond to their pressure, charm, or tactics. You don't crave approval. You don't fear rejection, and you don't bend to their rules. Your independence, your clarity, and your alignment make it impossible for them to claim ownership over you. They can't manipulate you into obedience, guilt, or attachment, and that fact terrifies them. It's not a challenge they can fight with aggression, persuasion, or theatrics. It's a reality they cannot alter. You are untouchable in ways they were never taught to navigate, and that lack of control drives their obsession. They fix it because their entire identity depends on the belief that influence equals power, and you exist outside that system. Every attempt to impose themselves, every strategy to dominate, every calculated move fails. They are left exposed, realizing that your energy, your choices, and your presence cannot be dictated or silenced. This creates a tension that is equal parts fear, fascination, and frustration. They are caught in a loop analyzing, testing, and observing you, desperate to regain some measure of the control they have always relied on. But the harder they try, the more impossible it becomes. Your existence highlights a truth they cannot accept. Power that relies on domination is fragile, while freedom and alignment are invincible. You are proof that control is an illusion for anyone who cannot govern themselves first, and that realization is maddening for someone whose life is built on command. You don't need to fight them or even respond. You simply are, and that truth alone is enough to unhinge them. You are the uncontrollable, unclaimable force they can't silence, and that is why they cannot stop thinking about you, analyzing you, and obsessing over you endlessly. Conclusion: when a chosen one enters a space dominated by manipulation, control, and illusion, everything changes, not because of conflict or confrontation, but because of presence, authenticity, and alignment. You don't need to prove your power, enforce your authority, or fight for recognition. Your energy, your independence, and your clarity do the work for you. You expose what is false, illuminate what is hidden, and make the entire architecture of control wobble without lifting a finger. Cult leaders, people who built their existence on domination and fear, suddenly find themselves confronted by something they cannot predict, manipulate, or possess. They obsess, fixate, and scramble, not out of admiration in the conventional sense, but out of the disorientation and awe caused by a presence that refuses to bend. Every point we explore today, from the way your authenticity destroys illusions to how you awaken abandoned humanity, to the fact that your common emotional intelligence render their manipulation useless, paints a single picture. You are a force that exists outside their system. Your independence, your spiritual resonance, your capacity to influence without force, and your untouchable alignment create a mirror that shows them everything they're not and everything they secretly fear they can never become. They cannot control it. They cannot manufacture it. They cannot silence it. And in that space, obsession is inevitable, because they are forced to confront truths about themselves they spent a lifetime hiding from. This isn't about ego or superiority. It's about being untouchable, aligned, and real in a world built on illusion. You stand in your truth, and your presence becomes evidence that freedom, clarity, and authentic influence cannot be faked, bought, or manipulated. That is why they fixate, why they obsess, and why they cannot escape the reality of who you are. If this video resonated with you and opened your eyes to the depth of your power and presence, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights like this. Hit the like button if you felt the truth in these words. Leave a comment sharing your experiences or revelations, and share this video with anyone who needs to understand their own untouchable power. You are not just surviving, you are rewriting the rules, and the world is noticing. Stay aligned, stay aware, and keep shining. God bless you.